sure that those sanctions were fully implemented.
In October 1999, De Beers announced plans to close its Angolan buying offices. To those personally affected by the war, the definition of a conflict diamond matters little.
The human cost for conflict diamonds in Angola in particular is very plain to see. You only have to look at the amputees walking in Luanda. Angola was one of the most heavily landmined countries in the world and still is, and people are still losing their lives as a result.
The knowledge that diamonds were funding the loss of life and limb in Angola did little to stop the carnage. And when another African nation descended into chaos, diamonds would once again be linked to a human tragedy of historic proportions.
They would go into towns, they would drag people out of their houses, they would butcher them.
It happens every day. History.
For all our technological power, we can't control the climate, and we ignore its changes to our peril.
Any change in the weather can be catastrophic. We could have conditions that will parallel the horrors that Europe faced in the Little Ice Age.
It's not at all implausible that these are the conditions under which nuclear weapons might be used.
Little Ice Age, Big Chill. Saturday at 8 on History.
Scattered throughout eastern and southern Sierra Leone are hundreds of square kilometers of soil, abundant in rough diamonds.
The real underlying problem where conflict diamonds are concerned is the uncontrolled nature of diamond digging in countries where you have alluvial diamonds.
Easily accessible to opportunists, corrupt governments and rebel armies, diamonds have colored much of Sierra Leone's past and nearly destroyed a proud nation founded on principles of freedom. In 1462, a Portuguese explorer came upon a stunning stretch of Africa's west coast, crowned by steep hills.
He felt they looked like a crouching lion, and so he gave the name Serra Leoa. Over the years, that name has been changed to what we know it today as Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone played a leading role in the thriving 18th century slave trade. It was from here that the famed slaves of the Amistad Revolt set sail. Conversely, the country also attracted the attention of British abolitionists. They helped bring freed slaves from the United States, Great Britain and Canada to Sierra Leone. The liberated slaves were settled in a coastal town called the Province of Freedom. It was later renamed Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone.
A lot of ex-slaves were brought here, and these mixed with the local population, and it was quite a vibrant place. Over time, there was a lot of intermingling among these settlers, which gave rise to a totally new culture in West Africa known as the Creole culture.
As a British colony, Freetown became a center for education and progressive ideas. The rest of the country remained largely undeveloped until 1930, when diamonds were discovered.
And since then, diamonds have continued to play a very big role in our economy.
A single company, the Sierra Leone Selection Trust, the SLST, was issued exclusive mining rights. An illicit network of diamond miners and smugglers quickly developed. Contraband rough was secretly carried into Liberia and Guinea.
Monrovia, Liberia became a bit of a boomtown as diamond purchasers from European houses realized the wealth of cheap diamonds that were available in Monrovia.
In the early 1950s, new diamond deposits were discovered.
In 1955, there was this great diamond rush where everybody went to the diamond mines in search of quick wealth. So the monopoly that SLST had was threatened.
When I lived there in the 60s, the Sierra Leone Selection Trust had an army, 500 men. They had 2 helicopters and they had trucks, and their whole business was to round up illicit diggers.
Despite widespread smuggling, Sierra Leone officially exported a lucrative 2 million carats of diamonds a year. This revenue was crucial after Britain ended its colonial rule.
When Sierra Leone got independence in 1961, the prospects looked pretty good. It had a fairly good infrastructure. There was a railroad, there was a network of highways, there were schools, there was a university. But many of the institutions were very, very fragile.
Sierra Leone's decline began in 1967 when Shaka Stevens became Prime Minister.
He, over time, embarked on a highly centralized one-party form of government, which adversely affected the living standards of the people. Important institutions in this country, like the military, the police, were all corrupted and politicized.
The government claimed 51% of the Sierra Leone Selection Trust shares.
Gradually, the diamond industry was nationalized. The government brought in all kinds of shady characters. They brought in American mafia. There were just an incredible range of very, very bad people involved in the diamond business. Official diamond exports went from, $200 to $300 million a year down to almost nothing.
Over the next 2 decades, funding for social services evaporated. Education, healthcare, and infrastructure collapsed. The press and social dissent were restricted.
Pretty soon you had state in free fall. A lot of young students, university students, were radicalized during this time and by this experience, and they formed a kind of an opposition that fed into the early days of the rebel movement that started up in the early 90s.
One of the rebel leaders was former Army Corporal Foday Sankoh.
Foday Sankoh, I know him very well. It's like a chameleon. Chameleon in the sense, a chameleon can take any color. The way he sees you is the way he appears to you. At times he looks nice, simple, loving, but Foday Sankoh is very difficult to accept, and Foday Sankoh cannot keep to his words. Today he is black, tomorrow he is white.
Sankoh allied himself with a vicious rebel leader just across Sierra Leone's border.
We will fight street to street, house to house, and we'll defeat them.
Charles Taylor from Liberia had a big plan to create Greater Liberia, and that really involved attacking Sierra Leone, but also he had a strategic need to take over the diamond fields in Sierra Leone to pay for his own war and to pay for the war in Sierra Leone.
No, master! No slave. No slave! It's nothing. You have to do it for yourself.
Together, Taylor and Sankoh gave birth to the nascent Sierra Leonean rebel army known as the RUF, the Revolutionary United Front.
Chancellor promised them that after his own war, he's going to help them to create a revolution in Sierra Leone.
In 1989, Taylor and his followers launched a civil war in Liberia. Sankoh set up a base in western Liberia along Sierra Leone's border. From there, he began to recruit and train his army. Sankoh's foot soldiers were largely uneducated and easily indoctrinated.
There was a lot of poverty, but there were a lot of disaffected young men who were very easily picked up by Foday Sankoh. It wasn't too hard to get this thing rolling.
In March 1991, the RUF invaded Sierra Leone.
Many people believe that the RUF actually had a genuine cause, a grievance against the government. The so-called legitimate government of Sierra Leone squandered the diamond revenues. They stole the money that should have gone for development. No money was going back to build schools or hospitals. The infrastructure in Sierra Leone was atrocious.
A year after the RUF invasion, a military junta staged a successful coup. It was to be one of 3 governments that tried to combat the RUF over the course of the war. But to Sankoh, it mattered little who sat in the presidential palace.
He was a power-thirsty man who wanted to govern his country, Sierra Leone, at all costs.
The RUF swept uncontested into lucrative diamond districts in the east. Sanko's rebel army brutalized anyone who stood in the way.
So I've been there as I picked this guava. Now
I was picking guava from a tree when I saw them. Some wearing red, some had red ribbons. 10 of them. They asked me why I was frightened. They literally fell on me and sexually assaulted me.
RUF soldiers gave themselves gruesome nicknames, such as Bloodmaster, Wicked to Women, and the Killer.
They don't go surround the village and don't capture some of we about.
They surrounded the village and captured about 55 of us. They put us together and then called upon a boy known as the Killer. They decided to sacrifice someone. They brought a lady